Joining us for this weekend special is New York Times author Kenneth P. Vogel, author of Devil's Advocates, The Hidden Story of Rudy Giuliani, Hunter Biden, and the Washington Insiders on the Payrolls of Corrupt Foreign Interests. I've read this thing. It's excellent. Really enjoyed it. When we're going to get into the book and what it took to write it and what brought you to writing it, I wanted to start with one piece that I think emerged a little bit after the book came out, which is the Trump Justice Department announced very quietly, and it got almost zero coverage, that they just weren't going to enforce criminal laws anymore when it came to foreign lobbying in Washington. And as you reported at the New York Times, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is quite familiar with foreign lobbying rules, having been on the payroll of the Qatari government, which is among many Gulf and other countries, spends money to influence here in Washington. So what happened, and how did they just announce that they're going to just decriminalize foreign lobbying? And
I just want to tack on to that question, Ken. Tell us about updates, too, just in the last matter of days, as the Trump administration has said they're targeting Antifa and foreign influence in the United States. There has been some reporting that now the FARA division may have, in fact, some enforcing. So what's going on?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I take this question very seriously, like Corinne Jean-Pierre. But yeah, I mean, there's been a cycle of enforcement or sort of vigor around FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is like the law that we use to at least enforce transparency around foreign lobbying, so that people, voters, constituents, media consumers can know whether a message or a messenger is being paid by a foreign government. And so, for a long time, this law, which goes back to the 1930s and like sleuthing out Nazi propaganda, was basically ignored by all these very well-connected Americans who were taking this money from foreign governments to try to influence Washington, and sometimes in ways that were anathema to U.S. foreign policy interests. And it was only during the first Trump administration with the Mueller investigation that we really saw a ramping up of this type of enforcement. Well, obviously, that is one of the great, in Trump's mind, that's the original sin of the Justice Department and the sort of what he views as the weaponized prosecutions against him and his allies. And so it was not surprising that Pam Bondi herself, as you mentioned, a former foreign lobbyist, when one of her very first moves when she gets in is to announce that she's going to decriminalize the enforcement of FARA. And it was already sort of trending this way, where this sort of heightened sensitivity that a lot of people in the foreign influence space had about enforcement. They were like, oh, good, Trump's back in. We don't have to be as rigorous about disclosure. And Pam Bondi's announcement really sort of finished that thought in a way that they felt comfortable. And now you're right, Emily, when it's convenient for them, when they think that there's an angle to use it to go after their political rivals as opposed to people in their own camp, the Trump Justice Department seems to be headed towards a ramping back up of a very selective type of FARA enforcement.
Well, one of the wonderful things about this book, I mean, you can see it on the cover, Rudy Giuliani, Hunter Biden, and the Washington Insiders on the payrolls of corrupt foreign interests. That's right and left. That's Democrats and Republicans. And the fascinating thing about this book and all of your reporting on Ukraine lobbying in particular, it's how bipartisan the swarm of lobbyists around the question was. And part of the origins of this case study is Podesta Group and Manafort. And Manafort, you can correct me if I'm wrong, had a lot more. Paul Manafort, former Trump campaign chairman, had a lot more money coming in than the Podesta Group, though they still had significant sum of money coming in. But there was enforcement of this that was turning a blind eye to the Republican lobbyists and the Democrat lobbyists. And what we seem to be heading towards now is maybe enforcement just of the Democratic lobbyists. Is that a fair assessment of what the Trump administration's FARA policy might look like?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see how they actually use this. I think like some of the suggestions about how, it could be used to target like Antifa, or it could be used to target like, foreign interests that are funding liberal causes is like sort of misses the mark.
Palestinian groups. Right?
Yeah, that's not really and also it's like difficult to enforce FARA. I mean, even when they were really putting a lot of resources into it, they were losing cases. I mean, they brought, you mentioned the Manafort thing, they brought a case, a very high-profile case against Greg Craig, the former Obama White House counsel, who was one of the many Democrats who were involved in this very bipartisan effort to whitewash the reputation and get out of trouble this Russia-aligned strongman president of Ukraine. They brought a case against him and they lost, and it was embarrassing. And it really revealed the weaknesses of this law, which again dates from almost a century ago, and does not really capture the type of activity that we see in the influence game now, including like paid influencers, podcasting.
Right, yeah, do they qualify? Like, let's say, because Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs is, they registered with FARA and they said we're going to give $7,000 or whatever to these people posting. Do the people posting have to declare anything? Like, how does that work? Are they're supposed to name who they're in communication with, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very open question, and you do see some who are sort of in that space as influencers who are disclosing. Rod Blagojevich, interestingly, the former disgraced governor of Illinois, who was pardoned by Trump, signed up the month after he got the pardon, signed up to lobby for, or as a foreign agent for, this Republika Srpska, this Russia-aligned autonomous territory in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And he's like tweeting about how this autocrat, this like pro-Putin autocrat in the Balkans is, being framed, and he's a victim of political persecution, just like Trump. And on every single tweet, he has like the FARA disclaimer, which is quite long. And if it was just the, 140 or 280 character limit, he probably wouldn't be able to fit it in there. But he does. And yet there are plenty of other people who are not doing the same. And we certainly saw with that Tenet media prosecution that they were alleging that this was the sort of similar thing that was going on in the podcasting realm. And it's not clear, like, would there be like a First Amendment, would there be like a freedom of the press type of exemption where people who are getting paid either directly by a foreign government or through a middleman, like one of these influencer agencies, whether they would have the obligation themselves. And if you talk to some of these influencers, interestingly, sometimes they'll say, like, I don't even know who the client is. I just believe in this cause, and someone like an influencer agency paid me, but I don't know who their client was. So there's a lot of opacity in this space. I mean, there always has been, and I think there's even more so now with sort of the rise of like some of these influencers and podcasters as, really important players in some of the debates that traditionally were the territory of like lobbyists and pundits and people who were sort of more in the, permanent Washington professional class.
Although op-ed writers have gotten caught up in FARA in the past, right? Wasn't there a Malaysian effort to have people on the right pen op-eds that were like vaguely favorable to Malaysia in the 2010s?
I mean, there was a woman, Sumi Terry is her name, who's Max Boot's wife, who was indicted. And I'm not sure the status of that case, but she was indicted as like an unregistered foreign agent for South Korea. And some of what she was doing was writing op-eds, sometimes with Max Boot. And now they have appended like editor's notes on some of them in the Washington Post, like indicating that the wife was on the payroll of the South Koreans.
And Tom Barrack, who is Trump's very good friend, real estate developer, and he's now the ambassador to Turkey, or no, ambassador to Lebanon, right? Yeah, ambassador to Lebanon, or is it Turkey? Anyway, he's of Lebanese descent and is a very like controversial and kind of
Lebanon.
Yeah, he's an interesting figure in Lebanon.
Wait, Turkey.
So Turkey, but he plays in Lebanon politics a lot.
Yes.
He got indicted and prosecuted for being an unregistered agent, I believe, for the Emiratis, and also acquitted. Like, why? Like, what is the problem with this law that people who appear to be doing the thing they're accused of, just from a kind of colloquial, it looks like he's doing this, but then it gets in front of a jury, and the juries are like, no, this didn't actually qualify.
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, Barrack is in the book, as by the way, is Pea Bondi's work for the Qataris, but Barrack, he was texting back and forth with like an Emirati business person who was like closely aligned with the government. But the argument that he made was that no, he wasn't taking direction. And Farah is very specific about like what is required to trigger it. You have to be like acting, at the direction, control. There's a bunch of like magic words that are intended to capture when you are actually like doing the bidding of the government, as opposed to like acting on your own in a way that is aligned with the government or aligned with someone who is not in the government but is sort of aligned with the government. So there's all these sort of steps that you have to sort of get through to be able to prove that someone is violating this law by not registering. And in the case of Barrack, another high-profile loss, by the way, for the Justice Department coming out of. I mean, that wasn't directly related to the Mueller investigation, but it was, there was a sort of suite of cases that came out of the Mueller investigation, triggered ramp up of the Farah unit within DOJ, and that was one, and he lost. And it's so interesting because he's like texting with this guy after delivering talking points to Donald Trump during the presidential campaign that were like Emirati talking points that Trump then included in his public statements. And he texts something about like, a win. He texts like a win
team,
for the
right?
home team. Yeah. And the home team in that construct is the UAE, not the US. And yet still it wasn't sufficient to generate, to get the jury to convict him. So, it's a challenge. And it's, by the way, I'm not saying that like this is something that like I'm like bemoaning. Like it should be a high standard to like prove that someone is not just acting on their own and expressing their like First Amendment right to lobby the government or to say whatever on their podcast or on social media. But it creates a scenario where it's like very difficult to know when a foreign government or a foreign government-aligned, business person is influencing the political debate.
Right, like the argument about Jared Kushner would be, you took this money into your affinity partners fund, and it's from the government. But how do you prove that he's acting in his capacity as an agent of Qatar, or you really wouldn't be able to prove that? Yeah,
100%. I mean, and that actually gets at a development that I think we've seen in a big way in the second Trump administration. So a little bit in the first Trump administration, but like influence is not just like paying a lobbyist. Influence is like a business deal or dangling a business deal to, Jared Kushner or Don Jr. or, the Witkoff's kids. And we see that, I think, affecting the way that the Trump administration exercises its like power on the world stage in a very big way. And sometimes, by the way, it's not all bad. I mean, Jared Kushner and Witkoff were on 60 Minutes, and they were asked about like a potential conflict of interest with their dealings in the Middle East on property and the like. And Kushner said, like, this is experience. We don't call this a conflict of interest. We call this experience. And were it not for that experience that he had in the region, he's arguing or suggesting certainly that like he wouldn't have been as successful in helping to broker this peace deal. And so, I think that's probably a little bit too cute, but like there's maybe something there. And then we have to like weigh to ourselves. We have to sort of like do this calculation. Is it worth like the potential benefits of having people who have like high level contacts because they're doing business in another part of the world with the potential conflict of interest that arises when there's this specter that are you doing something because, are you using your connections to the U.S. government in a way that is like in the interest of U.S. foreign policy and the taxpayer, or are you doing it because it's in the interest of your business?
And what I've always found so helpful about your reporting on this is that it doesn't come from a kind of partisan perspective. It's just, and when you start looking into foreign lobbying, you see that partisanship does kind of just fade away. Like it's, as you put, I think you say it in the book, it's the green team.
Right.
They're just, they are at war with each other inside Washington, but then there's those same Democratic firms and Republican firms will team up to go pitch whichever oligarch they can get on their side. And I feel like that it's kind of a throwback style of reporting. I feel like you've come up in a way that is almost gone, like at this point. And fun trivia is that Ken and I started the exact same day in 2006 at what was then called the Capitol Leader.
Wow.
It was going to be a worse version of like the Hill and Roll Call run by the Albritons.
I don't know, man. We would have succeeded at the Capitol Leader. Yeah, but definitely not.
Well, that was their vision.
Pivoting to the
our
digital
vision,
age?
we would have made it a success, but their vision was just a bunch of lobbying ads to funding like a rag that gets passed around Capitol Hill.
Right.
But before it could get off the ground, they scrapped that and hired Jim Vandehei, Mike Allen, John Harris, these superstar journalists at the time. And they said, scrap this. We're doing something completely different. It's going to be called The Politico.
The Politico.
We're going to focus on the internet. We're also going to do the Capitol publication because that's where the money is. Like it's like $10,000 for a day for like one ad.
Yeah.
And if you imagine let's say there's 20 ads in there, like that money adds up.
We got the
quickly.
Punch Bowl numbers a couple months ago. They're insane.
Punch Bowl doing quite well.
Yeah.
Because those people, like that's a high value audience. But so then everyone at the Capitol Leader was in this crazy situation where they're like, you guys probably wouldn't have gotten jobs at Politico because now this is going to be a high profile publication. But since you're here, you can try out for jobs at Politico.
Sort of like snuck in through the back door a little bit.
Through the back door. And it was me, Ken, Dan Riley, it was a bloodbath.
Yeah.
Like they fired almost everybody.
To their credit, I think Robert Albritton, who owned Politico and WJLA at the time, since sold it to Der Spiegel, Axel Springer. They allowed the reporters who they probably wouldn't have hired. They allowed them to stick around and sort of demonstrate, whether they could cut it. And I guess you and I cut it. Maybe I don't know.
We cut it. We survived
20 years later. So.
Yeah. We're still in the business. But one of my favorite stories. Talk about how you. Because like the way that, for people who don't know, the way the journalism industry used to work is you go find a small newspaper somewhere and cover the Capitol or cover city council. And then a couple of years after that, you move up to kind of a medium-sized newspaper. Eventually you get to like the Philadelphia Inquirer or something like that. And then eventually from there, you get to the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times. And that kind of route, it really trains people in an effective way because you learn how city councils work. You learn how state governments work, and your mistakes aren't going to start a war. Also, because it's dangerous having like 22-year-olds who are writing for like it's an internship, but they have a byline at a major paper, and they make a mistake, and boom, now somebody's getting bombed. It's like, well, wait a minute, you should like be screwing up a small town council race somewhere first, and then learn as you grow. One of my favorite stories was there the Harrisburg paper where
Ken started a war.
Yeah, well, you didn't start a war, but you bought some used furniture that was stuffed with files.
Yes. So I actually staffed the Wilkes-Barre Times Leader as Harrisburg Bureau was like defunct. They hired me to like restart it. So the bureau is like one person, me. And so I need to like buy furniture to like furnish this, little sort of cubby hole inside the state capitol newsroom. So I went to the state surplus store where like all the agencies would send their like used furniture. And I bought like a desk and a file cabinet and maybe some other stuff. And they delivered it to the Capitol. I'm like going through it. And it was like from the state probation office. And there were files from people like their worst moments of like the crimes that they committed and their efforts to like get their life back on track. And then the filing cabinet was from like the tax division. I go through it. There's like tax filings in there. People's like with social security numbers. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go back to the surplus store. And I went to the store and I was literally going through like all the drawers. And I was like, I pulled like all these files and I wrote a story about like the sloppy record keeping and some of the stuff that was revealed, and it did cause like a big scandal. Didn't start a war, but yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of like a flavor of the type of like observation that you get when you're actually like out there. And the other thing I think that is like a key is like an important aspect of like that type of reporting that unfortunately is like, it's not just that it's gone, that people like prefer to work in Washington and go straight to, roll call or punch bowl or whatever. They do, but also the opportunities aren't there because all these newspapers have like really contracted, and none of them have state capitol bureau. Very few of them have state capitol bureaus. I mean, they barely have like staff to cover the town council. But like when you're doing that type of reporting, the people who are affected, who are the subjects of your story or who are affected by what you're writing about, like you see them at the grocery store, you see them, at the town council meeting. And so you can't be like as snarky and as, you have to like be like put a little more onus on like being fair and like capturing their views. Otherwise, like, they're gonna be pissed at you at the grocery store, but they're also not gonna talk to you in a way that like if you're covering Congress, I mean, there's still some of that, but like, some office doesn't like you, you move on to another office and like
535.
Right, get your scoop that way. And so I think that that's sort of a loss, not lost entirely, but like not as many journalists sort of like have that sensibility that they need to like make sure that like if they see the person like the next day after you write about them, that they're going to feel like their sentiments are captured.
But also a loss of beat reporting as newsrooms have contracted. And I remember Tim Carney threw me on the Ukraine beat in like 2017 or 18 when you had done so much reporting on this already at the New York Times. And I was going through trying to make sense of this insane story about the European Center for Modern Ukraine, which you write in the book about. But I was like an opinion columnist at the Washington Examiner who just got tossed onto this as you guys were building out the reporting at the Associated Press. CNN had done some stuff, and certainly you at the Times, Ken. And you have to run into this problem all the time when you've been covering something, somebody who writes about influence and reports out influence. People stumble into the beat and seem to have no idea about Yanukovych, for example, like the broader context about it. And as somebody who is so deep in the weeds on that, you probably read other reporting and realize what a loss it is that you don't have other people whose jobs, it's almost not their fault. They haven't specialized in it and sort of bathed themselves in it for years like someone in your position has.
Yeah, I mean, that the Ukraine stuff is like particularly complicated. Like even to this day, there are stories that emerge from Ukraine. I'm like, I don't understand like who's on what side here because it's like a hall of mirrors. Yeah, I mean, Burisma's like, a good example.
Peter Schweitzer reporting on Burisma, and then was Joe Biden firing the prosecutor for what? Who was being protected by the fire?
Was he
you
prosecuting?
genuinely
Was he
don't
not
know.
prosecuting?
Right.
It's almost impossible to know, and it's set up that way in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I do report, right, and this is a particular example where I have, as you mentioned, like really devote a lot of bandwidth and firepower to try to unpack that. And like, yeah, I think it became the sort of confusion around it and the hall of mirrors like elements of it allowed for partisans on either side to spin it in a way that was misleading. And they both were misleading. You know, Democrats claiming that, this prosecutor, Burisma wanted this prosecutor to remain because he wasn't actually doing anything and it was good for them.
Right.
Well, that's false. Burisma wanted the prosecutor gone because the prosecutor, even if he wasn't investigating, was using the threat of investigations to solicit bribes from Burisma. And according to some people, including in the United States government, Burisma actually paid the bribes. So they wanted the case to be settled and they wanted like a clean bill of health. So they were glad when the prosecutor was fired, a new prosecutor came in and actually did sort of go through it with them and their lawyers who were recruited indirectly by Hunter Biden, I should say. And so they got what they wanted from the firing. And then on the other side, Republicans saying like Joe Biden pushed for the firing because that, to help Burisma because that prosecutor was really aggressively, investigating by the book this, Burisma and the oligarch who owned it. And that's false as well. Like he wasn't doing anything of the sort. He was corrupt, but so too was everyone else in the Ukrainian government. And so the sort of the complicated nature of that story, I think, was a good example of how these types of things can be used for sort of partisan benefit without actually, even attempting to get at the truth.
And you write in the book about your own experience kind of navigating all of these partisan crosswinds, which is so fascinating because for a lot of Democrats, they came after you relentlessly and said, oh, he's like helping Rudy Giuliani get this like information out about Hunter Biden. But at the same time, as you write in the book, like your original report about Giuliani's planned trip to Ukraine to dig up dirt on Hunter Biden led him to cancel his trip. It exposed that, and was then like repeatedly cited by the whistleblower letter that was sent to Congress that led to the impeachment of Donald Trump. So normally, if a journalist's reporting leads to the impeachment of the president, the party that carries out the impeachment is grateful for that reporting. Thank you for uncovering this stuff. Now we're going to go ahead and make hay of it and impeach the guy. But as you write in the book, the Biden campaign kind of went nuclear. Sent like angry professional lawyer letters to the New York Times, asked for calls with editors saying it was egregious journalistic malpractice. So how did you kind of grapple with this bifurcated situation where on the one hand they're using your material to impeach the president and on the other hand impeaching your entire credibility as a journalist?
Yeah, I mean it was a tricky situation. I think we get caught we get caught up in the crossfire a lot, you know, when you're just like following the facts and not giving one side or the other exactly what they want. It doesn't really fit neatly into the, you know, the partisan filter that is unfortunately used to process like every single story. And so, yeah, that was like a tricky moment. You know, the part of it was also that I had reported something that was sort of the genesis of like Rudy and Trump's interest in Ukraine, which was like this sort of campaign being run out of the Ukrainian embassy during the 2016 campaign, where they were like sort of disseminating dirt on Paul Manafort. And so, you know, that was something that, you know, the Republicans liked and the Democrats didn't like. And then you had, you know, the questions about whether our story on Burisma and Hunter Biden working there was, you know, was like carrying the water of, you know, I mean, we tried to, you know, I think the more valid sort of criticism was that the story like maybe tried to do too much. It was both like exploring the facts behind Hunter Biden's engagement with Burisma and also revealing the pressure campaign that Rudy Giuliani and Trump were mounting. And so it's sort of, I think, in some ways like opened the door for this type of criticism, even though I thought that this criticism was sort of bad faith.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part in the book where you mentioned, I think this is towards the end, that it was Lev Parnas who called you Rudy's guy in the New York Times, right? Rudy's guy in the New York Times.
Or the BTC or whatever. What's that restaurant? BLT?
Yeah. The BLT club or something like that.
I mean, when you're...
the BLT team.
The BLT
It's a
team,
restaurant
it's like high
in DC.
school.
Yeah, it
Which
was
you say
in the
in the
Trump
book.
Hotel, the former Trump Hotel, now the Waldorf Astoria.
Doing this reporting in the Times, which is a media outlet that the people who do foreign lobbying actually really care about, has to be a wild experience because they read everything you write. It's not like you're posting it in some blog or newsletter or Substack. Like, they really have to pay attention to everything you write because it could be used in court. It's seen as very credible. So that must be in and of itself, like we were talking about you working at the Wilkes-Barre Times, doing this at the New York Times. It's very high pressure reporting, I imagine.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I mean, to your point about, you know, sort of the Biden campaign going nuclear, it's actually like, I think of it as like to refer back to your previous segment, a beta test in some ways of the effort that the Biden team mounted to try to shout down the reporting on Biden's age-related decline. That they went after like the higher profile media outlets, thinking that like if they could dissuade either dissuade them up front or discredit their reporting after it came out, that it would discourage other media outlets from following suit. So I think, you know, with the age-related decline thing, you saw the Wall Street Journal actually really bearing the brunt of that. Annie Linsky and some of her colleagues had a great story that I think laid out a lot of this stuff in very clear terms about, you know, Biden's like fading out at meetings and the like. And they really bore the brunt of a very aggressive and organized pushback from not just the White House, but the entire left. And so I think that in some way, and, you know, ultimately they were like proven right. And many media outlets now have like picked up on that. I don't know if you could say the same thing about me. Like, I definitely like, you know, have the scars of the Biden folks coming after me.
Everyone's still mad at you.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know if I've been like vindicated in the same way, but I think that they saw that it could be effective. That type of pushback and trying to discredit the reporting could be effective at like staunching the coverage, because there still wasn't that much coverage throughout the, you know, the rest of the term. And obviously, you know, my reporting started on like Hunter and Burisma in 2019, and you saw what happened when the laptop came out in the weeks before the 2020 election. Like, there weren't a lot of folks who were willing to like go near it, although the circumstances of that were a little tricky as well, because Rudy wouldn't actually provide the information. I didn't get the laptop until many months after the election.
And let's also touch on that and dispense with the Lev Parnas stuff for a minute. Our viewers probably know Aaron Parnas, who's become this like phenomenon on TikTok, where he news breaks and he tells you what news just broke. His father, Lev Parnas, went to prison for unrelated corruption stuff, but he was involved with this Giuliani thing, and so yeah, he alleged that you were like the guy that they would leak to at the BLT Club, this restaurant, which you say in the book never went there with them. But Parnas himself it sounds like he tried to make a bunch of these allegations in this Rachel Maddow documentary. They checked them out and didn't include them. So then he made them subsequently, publicly, just in his own interviews against you. But as you write in the book, he also had reached out to you within some recent time frame of that, trying to continue to be a source for you and praising some of your reporting. So can you talk a little bit about Lev Parnas, and this kind of vendetta that he's been on?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think some of it may have been the result of me actually reaching out to his son, Aaron, because I had some reporting. Because I'm trying to tell the story in like a narrative way and like make the bring the characters to life and sort of show the evolution. And so part of it was like Lev and Igor Fruman, his business partner at the time, and their relationship with Rudy Giuliani and how that evolved. And, they were like quite close. And so one of the things that I reported in the book is that they were so close that Rudy actually gave like Aaron Parnas, when he was in law school at GW, gave him like legal research to do. And so like Aaron Parnas was kind of working for Rudy Giuliani. He says he wasn't paid, but I reached out to Aaron to sort of vet this and check it. He didn't deny it, but it was around that time when his father, came after me sort of in a more aggressive public way. So not necessarily connecting the dots there, but I think the timing is notable and may have suggested that Aaron Parnas has done quite well, and I think it probably would be inconsistent with his viewers and fans' sense of him if they were to know that he had like worked with Rudy Giuliani on some of these cases that were like conservative cases, related to like conservative causes. So that was interesting. And then Lev Parnas, I mean, I revealed that he was doing this work with Rudy Giuliani. Like I exposed that in the paper, and in a way that, set off the chain of events that ultimately led to him being convicted of these campaign finance violations and going to jail. So I wouldn't begrudge him if he wasn't a huge fan of mine.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. And Aaron Parnas, he's got himself trapped in his own, I think, circle of hell, where he just has to constantly now follow the news and tell you what's on the news every hour or so.
And to the point about influencers sort of being a new phase in like the sort of lobbying political advocacy world. He was also in this story about this 1630 fund that was offering stipends to influencers. So that was, I think, seen as discrediting in some ways some of these liberal influencers, both like in the news space and the folks who sort of blur the line between influencers and reporting, like Aaron Parnas. It's just yet another way that it's like increasingly difficult, but increasingly important to be able to try to track the money flows through these, vast, in that case, dark money, in some case, in the cases of stuff that I write about in the book, foreign governments and front groups. It's like tricky, but it's important because we want to know like who is paying for these messages.
Last question for me is, you have this really interesting narrative technique of using as the guide for the book. This guy, Robert is his first name?
Yeah,
Strick?
Robert Strick. Yeah.
So Robert Strick. And what's so fun about him as a character is that he's not he's not Manafort. He's not like the top guy. He's a guy who was on the periphery of Trump's 2016 election with as colorful a past and as colorful a character as you can imagine, the kind of guy that drafts onto a campaign like this. And because there's so few people that believed in Trump, he finds himself in the catbird seat when Trump wins. You have the great story of him. He has a victory party, what turns out to be a victory party, 2016 election at Morton's Steakhouse, and a little like outdoor patio there with his mom's credit card, and people are drinking, and his mom's credit card hits the limit, so people start getting cut off. His mom has to call the bar. And so the party goes on, and then he wins, and now all of a sudden, boom, he can work for every dictator around the world and every terrorist group who's trying to get off the terror list. And within 4 years, he bills tens of millions of dollars or whatever. He claims to bill many more because you have a hard time reporting out what his claims. He's one of these characters. He'll say something, And it turns out to be true. And you're like, no way. Then he'll say something else. And you're like, no, that's completely untrue. So how is Strick? Does he like the book? Are you still in touch with him? It must be an interesting experience for him to see this, to see himself like in a book like this.
Yeah, I am not in touch with him. He got quite upset during the fact-checking process, which, as you mentioned, is like quite arduous when someone is like not the most reliable narrator to be able to like fact-check stuff. So obviously I use a lot of documents and put to him documents that were inconsistent with his sort of, his sort of self mythologizing. But I have heard through intermediaries that he has not read the book and does not intend to read the book.
He doesn't strike me as a book reader.
Well, yeah, so I won't be expecting a negative review on Amazon from him. But I think he was emblematic of this moment when Trump like came to town in 2017. I mean, Trump was a true outsider. Like it was, the rhetoric about draining the swamp, like now it seems like ludicrous, but like at the time he was coming in and there were like a lot of these, traditional power centers in Washington, including on K Street, who were like quite upset and like unnerved by this like new force who didn't have any connections to them. And so it did open the door for a lot of folks who either had like peripheral connections to him, like Strick, or folks who had business connections to him, but were not, in the political space, to suddenly become power brokers in Washington. And it really did like reorder the swamp. Now, it very quickly like filled back up just with different folks. And now we have like the traditional swamp creatures, like the big lobbying firms, BGR, Mercury, et cetera, that are, have like advertised their Trump connections. So I think it's, the
Ballard.
Ballard is a great example. Yeah, I mean, he also came in, in 2017, had not even had a presence in Washington. He was a Florida lobbyist and became very quickly like a go-to for foreign regimes, for, domestic corporations, for all manner of political interests seeking to influence Trump, and made a huge business out of it. Strick a little bit less so, but I mean, within 6 months of that party, he had signed one of the biggest FARA contracts on record. It was $5.4 million upfront from Mohammed bin Nayef, who at that time was the Saudi crown prince. He eventually was sort of leapfrogged by MBS, a story that you've written a lot about. But it's an example of like the amount of money that there is sort of, floating around these, global interests that have a lot at stake with how Washington exerts its power on, trade, on, tariffs, on sanctions, on military assistance. And so, there's a lot riding on these decisions, and these foreign interests have a lot of motivation to find people who are well connected in Washington who can help them either stay out of the crosshairs in the case of sanctions or like negative policymaking, or to retain the flow of military assistance in the case of like positive policymaking. And there's a lot of there's a lot of vacation homes on the Eastern Shore and private school tuitions that have been funded as a result of this dynamic.
Ken, this book is so good. People absolutely have to go out and buy it. Thank you so much for taking time to do not just one segment on Breaking Points, but 2 segments on Breaking Points about devil's advocates.
It's a pleasure. I'll be back next week if you'll have it.
Excellent.
Also, we would be remiss if we didn't say go Eagles.
Oh, yeah.
Go
Birds.
Yeah.
The Packers are strong, too.
All right. Thank you so much, Ken Vogel.
It was a pleasure.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show, ad-free, and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.